Welcome into another edition of COVID Conversations. I'm David Kelly. There's a lawsuit that's headed over to the Arizona State Supreme Court. Bar owners here across Arizona are not happy with Governor Doug Ducey and some of his executive orders that pertain to them. I'm joined by Ilan Wurman. He is an attorney as well as a professor over at the Arizona State School of Law. He's handling this case for those bar owners. And Ilan, we talked about 10 days ago, kind of at the beginning of this whole situation. Bring me up to speed on where things stand right now with this lawsuit.
Yeah, so actually the Supreme Court just accepted our motion to add 24 additional plaintiffs. So now there's a total of 50 business owners who are suing in this particular lawsuit, and that brings us up to 44 total bars because some bars are co-owned and so on, and so we put on both owners and so on. So we're up to 3 to 4 dozen bars and almost 50 plaintiffs.
How important is that? I guess would it have mattered if you'd had more? Does the change in more bar owners, does that help the cause anymore? Or would that have mattered if it had stayed at the 20 you had initially?
Yeah, I think it's important for two reasons. One is because the Supreme Court has discretion whether to accept our case or not, because again, we're skipping the trial court, we're skipping the intermediate appellate courts. The more important the case is, the more likely the Supreme Court is to take it. And so the more bars that are involved from all over Arizona, the more I think the Supreme Court's going to realize how important this is. And it's also a political message that we're trying to send. A lot of people are hurting. A lot of people are suffering from the governor's orders. Again, no one denies that coronavirus is a problem. In fact, it's often a severe problem. Our only point, is that there are costs to these measures that the governor has taken, and these bar owners, they're really, really hurting. And so it's a political statement as well. A lot of people are hurting, and if you're hurting, come and join this action if you can.
This all started on a trip to Prescott. Did you imagine when you went to Prescott that day that this was going to kind of turn into what it has?
I had no idea it would turn into what this has turned into. As you're suggesting, this all started on the 4th of July weekend when I was out in Prescott, and we have a friend there and showing us around. We were on Whiskey Row across the Yavapai County Courthouse, and she was talking to her friends, and including bar owners and restaurant owners, about how much people were suffering. And she said, well, he's a lawyer, and in fact, a constitutional law professor. Maybe you should talk to him. And I'd been thinking about these issues for a while, and before you know it, we're on a Zoom call with 50 people, and then we filed a few days later.
The constitutional side of this, what is it that the bars are trying to accomplish with this lawsuit?
So there are two primary things. The first is we believe it's for the legislature to make these important policy decisions. This is what's called the non-delegation doctrine. This is Civics 101. We know that the legislature makes the law, the governor executes the law, and courts adjudicate cases under existing law. Well, the corollary of that is the legislature can't give away its legislative power. Well, the statute pursuant to which the governor has issued his orders purports to give him the entire police power of the state in the event of an emergency, basically the entire legislative power. So we argue this is a violation of the non-delegation doctrine. Look, the following three things are true. Let me restate the point another way, if I may. The governor has said that this is going to go on for the foreseeable future. There is no end in sight. This is the new normal. Okay, that's point one. Point two, the legislature is available and able to meet if he calls them into session. Third, these issues are important and contested policy questions. Well, if all three things are true, it can't be under our system of separated powers, under our system of representative government, that a single person gets to decide these important and contested policy questions for the foreseeable future, when the legislature is available to debate those measures.
Why does the legislature then give up these powers? Why wouldn't they want to be the ones to make these decisions for the people of Arizona?
That's actually a classic public choice theory problem. Why is it, and this happens at the congressional level too, why does Congress give so much of its legislative power over to the administrative agencies, right? Because it's very politically convenient to vote on something super broad like, we support clean air. There shall be clean air. And then it's up to the Environmental Protection Agency to decide the hard choices. Like, okay, shoot, who's going to pay for that? Who's going to have to pollute less? What are the economic costs? And then, so they win on the front end by saying, well, I voted for clean air. And then they win on the back end because then they can call their constituents, talk to their constituents and say, well, I didn't vote for that, and I'm going to fight for you at the EPA. Right? So they win on both sides. They don't want to make the tough policy choices. And this statute was enacted in 1971. You know, what was going on in 1971? I don't know. You know, that made them give up the whole police power of the state in the event of an emergency. But it's, you know, it's a politically useful for legislators to say, well, we want all the good and nice things, and then someone else has to make the hard choices. And then, you know, so it's very convenient for the legislature to delegate its power if that doesn't make it right or constitutional.
Now, just a little bit on your background. You're obviously a professor at the SU Law School. I mean, is this normal for somebody in your position to present a case like this? Is that kind of things that professors look to do, or did it, like we said before, it just kind of happened that you were in this situation and people were talking about it and you said, this might be something interesting that we could try to help them with?
Well, it's certainly true that most academics will happily sit in their ivory tower, write a law review article that gets cited or read by 10 people, and they're content with that. But, you know, I've been writing on non-delegation for years now. I've been writing on the administrative state and the separation of powers. And why do I write about these things? Well, because I believe in constitutional government. I believe in the separation of powers. I believe in this American experiment in constitutional government and in free government, and it's something that has to be defended. And so when this sort of arose, I jumped at the opportunity to make my ideas matter, and in my view, to help advance the cause of liberty and constitutional government, even if a little bit.
And there is no real monetary gain for these establishments other than the fact that they'll be able to open again and make money. There's no, in terms of the lawsuit, there's really no damages involved for them.
Right. We are not seeking damages, certainly not at this juncture. As a general matter, it's very hard to get damages from the government, whether it's because of something called sovereign immunity, if you're suing the state, or if you're suing an officer. There's something called qualified immunity, which I'm sure you've heard about. And with police officers, it's going to be even hard against the governor. There's a non-frivolous argument that this is a taking of property, a regulatory taking of property, but those are very tough, and especially in emergency situations. I mean, so we're not asking for that. All we want is a declaration of rights. All we want is an injunction to prevent the governor from doing this again. All we want is a voice in the legislative process. And all these bars want, right, these business owners want, is the ability to make a living, right? It's not simply that, like, they have to go on unemployment. They're not employees. They're business owners. They have to let other people go. They have to close. They have 2 of every bill to pay: 2 water bills, 2 electricity bills, 2 mortgages, 2 rents, right? And it's just unsustainable. Some of them are just going to have to open and risk losing their licenses because who cares? They're going to close down anyway. They're going to have to shut down completely. So, like, it's only a matter of time before they run out of money, and their whole businesses, their whole lives' work will collapse.
Now, you've added, I believe there's 3 Tucson bars that have been added into this second phase. So do you know much about each of these individual establishments? What do you try to, as the attorney, what do you try to find out about, say, Clicks here in Tucson or Monkey Bar? Do you try to find out, much about how they're operating, what they're doing? Does that kind of work into the whole aspect of the lawsuit, or are they just kind of, hey, we want to join this and it's okay, we're going to add you to it?
So all of them are Series 6 or 7 license holders that are subject to the latest executive order and basically have to shut down because they don't serve enough food, right? Because that's the sort of arbitrary distinction. Apparently, coronavirus goes away when you're serving a quesadilla with your margarita. So that's what it is. These are businesses these are bar owners. These are bars rather that have all but shut down. I mean, in theory, they can offer takeout, but that's not even worth most of them to stay open and pay someone to do that, right? To do takeout drinks. It's nothing. It's negligible. So they've all but closed down or entirely closed down. Some of them tried to stay open and then got shut down, because the liquor board said, no, you're not serving enough food. So then they've joined. So all of them are subject to the order and have effectively shut down or all but shut down.
Do you think, and I don't know if you want to offer an opinion on this, do you think that's too complicated a system? I mean, you've got, like you mentioned, you've got Series 6 and Series 7s, but then you've got restaurants where you might have a Series 6 and a Series 12, and as long as you have that Series 12, you can stay open. Is that too complicated a system for this whole things in terms of having all these different liquor determinations?
Well, what I'll certainly say is, I don't know if it's complicated, but it's certainly an arbitrary measure of the sanitary requirements. What series license you have is totally arbitrary and totally untethered to any actual public health matter, right? Again, if they want to come in and say there's not a single bar that can social distance like a restaurant, every single bar that I went to before this new executive order went into effect, social distance, required masks when you come up to the bar, every other table was X'd off, some of them had temperature checks. One of my clients bought plexiglass to separate between tables, right? They've all invested in it. And if you want to say that restaurants don't have the same concerns, or quite frankly, for that matter, Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, Safeway, then you're just trying to split the baby. You're trying to pick winners and losers because you want some economic growth, but you also want people to stay at home. But the Constitution doesn't allow you to pick winners and losers like that. It has to be rationally related. It has to be legitimately in pursuit of some public health purpose. And there's no public health argument that I can imagine, that I can conceive of, that distinguishes between bars and restaurants.
Ilan, as always, I appreciate the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's Ilan Wurman. And stay with us here at News 4 Tucson for continuing coverage of this lawsuit as it heads to the steps of the Arizona Supreme Court. And I'm David Kelly. Thank you for joining me on another edition of COVID Conversations.